Somewhere along the way, we learned that slowing down means falling behind. That rest is only justified after exhaustion. That to pause is to fail, even when we're tired. Even when we've lost direction. We push through mornings that ache and evenings that numb. We run past the signs, past the signals, past ourselves. Because somewhere in the back of our minds, there's a whisper that says, you have to keep up with what we're not even sure. And even when our bodies beg us to stop, we scroll faster, multitask harder, say yes when we mean please, no. Because if we slow down, we fear we'll be seen as lazy or weak or broken. But here's what no one tells you. The constant rush isn't proof of strength. It's often a sign that you've forgotten how to listen to your life. There's a kind of courage in choosing to move slowly in a world addicted to speed. There's rebellion in resting without apology. You don't have to earn your right to pause. You were born with it. Just like your breath, just like your heartbeat. Rest is your birthright. But we weren't taught that. We were taught to measure worth by motion, to attach value to output, to equate busyness with importance. So we internalize the pressure to be doing all the time, not because we love it, but because we fear what slowing down might reveal. The grief, the emptiness, the questions. But maybe what we're afraid to face is actually where our healing begins. Maybe the stillness isn't dangerous, it's sacred. Maybe the quiet is where we come home to ourselves. Why does resting feel like failure? Why does slowing down come with a shadow of shame? Maybe because we grew up watching people we love sacrifice themselves just to stay afloat. Parents who never sat still. Teachers who glorified grind. It's a culture that rewarded burnout with applause. So we learned without words that rest is dangerous, that slowing down makes you less than, that softness must be earned only after you've bled. But here's the truth. You are not a machine. You were never designed to go nonstop. Your value does not come from how productive you are. Your soul is not a factory. And yet, even now, when you sit down to breathe, a voice rises. You should be doing more. That voice isn't yours. It's inherited. It was planted in you by generations who survived by staying busy, but you're allowed to live differently. You're allowed to say, I'm tired, without apology, without explanation. The guilt is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're breaking a cycle, that you're learning to trust your body instead of forcing it. Rest is not laziness, it's repair. It's your nervous system saying, let me catch up with your heart. And when you ignore that, you don't become stronger, you just become more hollow. You function, but you forget how to feel. You perform, but you forget how to be. So maybe this time you let the guilt come, but not control you. Maybe you say to it, I see you. I understand where you came from, but I don't live by you anymore. That's how healing begins, not in the hustle, not in the proving, but in the radical act of choosing to rest, even when the world tells you not to. Imagine a world where every flower bloomed at the exact same time. It would look efficient, but it wouldn't be beautiful. Beauty, real beauty, is in variation, in seasons, in rhythm, in imperfection. Some leaves bloom early. Others grow deep roots before they rise. Some people sprint. Others walk barefoot through the mud, and both are sacred, both are valid. You don't need to match someone else's pace. To be worthy of peace, your journey is not behind. You are not late. You are living on time by a clock only your soul can hear, and when you stop comparing, you start noticing the way the light hits the wall in the morning, the warmth of a cup held in still hands, the kindness in your own breath. These are the things you miss when you're rushing. But in slowness, life whispers. And and you finally have time to hear it. In slowness, you remember that being alive is not a race. It's a relationship between your heart and your pace, between your body and this moment. And when you honor that pace, when you stop rushing your own unfolding, something softens. The need to prove fades, and what's left is presence. You start showing up to your life not as a worker, but as a witness, not as someone trying to conquer time, but as someone willing to feel it. This is where peace begins. Not in perfect control, but in deep permission. It's the kind that says you can move slow and still arrive. We've been taught that progress must be visible. If we can't measure it, it must not be real. So we look for numbers. Steps walked, goals checked, milestones hit, trophies gathered. But not all progress can be seen. Some progress is learning to breathe again after panic. Some is getting out of bed after days of heaviness. Some is saying no when you always said yes. Some is pausing instead of pushing. That's progress too, even if no one claps for it, even if you don't post about it, even if no chart rises to prove it. The world tells us to move faster so we can achieve more. But what if progress is learning to move slower so we can feel more? What if becoming isn't always about building something outside, but healing something inside? You see, healing is slow, awareness is slow, growth the real kind. It is not flashy. It doesn't always look inspiring. Sometimes it looks like stillness, or silence, or grief. But in that stillness, your roots are growing. And just because no one can see them, doesn't mean they're not real. Progress is not just about where you're going, but about who you're becoming as you get there. You can move slow and still be growing. You can be still and still be healing. You can pause and still be progressing. That's the lie of hustle culture, that movement is always forward. But some of the most important movement is inward. When you begin to listen instead of force, when you begin to soften instead of defend, when you begin to honor what your soul has been whispering for years, that's the kind of progress that changes everything. Right. But it won't look like much on the outside. There's no trophy for learning to love your pace. No award for choosing stillness over striving. But peace is the reward, and self-trust and gentleness, and the quiet power of someone who no longer needs to prove they belong. That's progress no one can take away from you. I should be further along by now. That sentence has lived in your head more times than you can count. Maybe it comes up when you scroll past someone else's win, or when you're lying in bed comparing your timeline to someone else's highlight reel. It sounds like urgency. It feels like shame. And it convinces you that you failed something unnamed. But here's what that voice never tells you. There is no universal schedule for healing, for becoming, for unfolding. You're not on the wrong path. You're on your path. And maybe your path has more curves, more pauses, more valleys. That doesn't make it less valid. It makes it more human. You can't fall behind on a timeline that was never yours to begin with. Think about it. No flower looks at another and says, I bloomed too late. No tree rushes its growth because others are taller. They grow because it's time, not because they're trying to catch up. What if your pace is not a problem, but a part of your wisdom? What if your detours were never distractions, but redirections? What if every moment you thought you were behind was actually an invitation to be more present with where you are? It's hard to see it that way, when everyone else seems to be running, but sometimes the fastest way forward is to stop, to breathe, to choose your next step. Instead of chasing it, you're not falling behind. You're falling into alignment with your truth, with your pace, with your life. There's no gold medal for getting there first, and no finish line that makes you more worthy, because the real win is not in getting ahead, but in getting home to yourself, your own pace. Slowing down isn't weakness, it's resistance. A quiet rebellion against a culture that wants to use you more than it wants to know you. You are not a product. You are not your output. You are not here to entertain, impress, or produce endlessly. When you choose to slow down, to listen, to care for yourself. To be instead of perform, you are saying, I am enough even when I am still. That's revolutionary, especially in a world that profits off your exhaustion. Every time you rest without apology, you are refusing to play a game that was never built for your peace. Every time you stop and breathe, you're reminding yourself, I am not behind. I am not broken. I am human. And that matters more than any deadline. Slowing down doesn't mean giving up. It means waking up. Waking up to the parts of you that have been silenced by noise, by rush, by fear. It means re-entering your life not as a task, but as a relationship. Relationship that says, I'm listening now. I'm staying. I'm not running anymore. The world may not reward you for moving slow, but your heart will, and your peace will. And one day, you'll look back and see. This was when I began to come alive. Not when I did more. But when I finally stopped running from myself, you are allowed to slow down. Not because you've earned it. Not because you're broken. Not because you're done. But simply because you are alive. Being alive is enough. To pause, to rest, to listen. You don't need to justify it. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to wait until you burn out to take a breath. You don't need to run just because others are. You don't need to rush. Just because the world is loud, you don't need to prove that you're worth the space you take. You already are. Your worth was never tied to your speed. It was never tied to your productivity. It was never tied to how much you could give before resting. You were worthy before you started, before you tried, before you did anything. So now, you're allowed to return to yourself, to move slower, to move differently, to move kindly, not because it's easy, but because it's true, because deep down, a part of you is tired of outrunning your own life. So stop, breathe, look around. This is your life. You're allowed to be here just as you are right now. No catching up required. You're not late, you're right on time. And you always have been. This is quiet philosophy, where thinking isn't loud, and life doesn't need to be either. Subscribe if you haven't already, not for noise, but for something you can actually feel.